something happened to me, and until now I haven't found the strength to tell anyone. But today, as I write these words inside my car parked in the building's garage, I feel that if I don't speak, something inside me will implode. So, please, if you're listening to this, just believe me. I work as a rideshare driver here in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's not exactly where I imagine spending my nights, but the bills don't wait, and the night shift always pays a little extra. But it's also the loneliest shift. The streets are empty, strangely empty, as if the whole city had been evacuated without warning. That night, the air was so cold I could see my breath inside the car. I turned on the heater, but it felt like the icy wind was coming in through some invisible spot in the dashboard. I was already exhausted before I even started. Weeks of interrupted sleep, recurring nightmares, and that nagging feeling that someone is watching me when the car is stopped at a traffic light. I started my shift as usual. I grabbed a weak coffee from the 24-hour place on the corner, left the radio off. The silence helped me keep my mind quiet, and opened the app. Nothing unusual, until something strange happened on the first few streets. As I turned onto a nearly deserted avenue, I heard a small touch. It felt like someone had lightly touched the back of the passenger seat with their finger. A dry but human sound. I thought it was my imagination, some plastic coming loose, anything. But then, a second later, the app vibrated. One passenger entered the vehicle. The phrase appeared on the screen with the same sound as always, but the car was empty. I even glanced reflexively at the back seat, even though I knew there was no one there. The interior camera confirmed it. Nothing. Empty warehouse, shadows cast, smooth upholstery. I tried to laugh at the situation. Probably a system bug, I muttered. It happens. The app sometimes crashes, registers duplicate calls, sends late notifications. But that wasn't a ride. It was the boarding notification. I kept driving, and as I drove down the wide avenue, that unsettling feeling grew. As if the air were getting heavier, denser. My breathing became short, and I don't even know why. I just know that, for some stupid reason, I avoided looking in the rearview mirror for a few minutes. When I finally looked, I swear for a moment I thought I saw movement. A shadow moving very slowly, like someone adjusting themselves in the back seat. I blinked. I looked again. Nothing. But when I looked back at the cell phone stuck in the dashboard, the app updated automatically. Passenger, Eleanor Briggs status, on board. That name. I'd seen it before. Somewhere. Not that night. In some newspaper, maybe. It was familiar in a wrong way. That's when I felt it for the first time, a sudden chill running down the back of my neck. As if someone had blown right behind my ear. And for the first time that night, I wondered if I was really alone in that car. I should have ended my shift there. I could have parked, taken a deep breath, turned off the car and gone home. But I didn't. I kept driving down the empty avenue, trying to convince myself that it was all just a technical error. One of those strange glitches that happen in the early morning hours when the servers slow down. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the harder it became to ignore the feeling that something was wrong with the air inside the car. It was colder. Heavier. As if the space behind me was being occupied by something. The app vibrated again. 2 passengers on board. I froze that I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just that dark emptiness, punctuated by the faint glow of the streetlights. But my breathing became erratic. Unsteady. The steering wheel began to slip slightly in my sweaty hands. I don't know why, but my eyes were drawn to the dashboard, as if part of me already knew something worse was happening. The screen displayed names. Eleanor Briggs, Samuel Norris. I knew them both, not personally, but I recognized it. 2 people are missing from the region. A shiver ran down my spine. My heart raced, and my hands trembled slightly as I touched my phone to try and cancel the ride. He didn't answer. The screen froze, as if someone were holding it. So, I heard a whisper. It wasn't a clear word. It wasn't a normal voice. It sounded like a weak whisper, like paper being crumpled in the dark. That it came from behind me. I turned my face slowly, too slowly, but the car was empty. Empty. Is anyone there? My voice came out weak, broken. Nothing. But the whisper returned. More defined this time. Like a short, stifled, scratchy phrase that I didn't understand what he was saying, but I felt it. I felt every syllable vibrate in the back of my neck. The air grew colder. So cold it burned. My fingers went numb on the steering wheel. My vision became slightly blurry at the edges, as if the world were shrinking around the car. And then, another vibration. 3 passengers on board. I choked. This time, the name that appeared made me lose my breath. Linda Avery. She disappeared 2 months ago. My brother worked on the search. The case became famous in the region. I pulled the car over. I needed to breathe. I needed to understand what was happening. But as soon as I stopped, something changed inside the vehicle. A very faint sound, like fabric moving. Like a weight adjusting in the back seat. And then, very slowly, very gently, the sound of breathing. Long human. Behind me. I closed my eyes for a moment. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I opened them, the app screen refreshed itself. The 3 names were flashing, and below them, a line that froze my blood. Awaiting destination. As if they were actually expecting me to take them somewhere. I don't know how long I stood there with the car running, trying to convince myself that it was some kind of hallucination caused by sleep. But hallucinations don't change the air. They don't make the atmosphere so heavy that it feels like you're breathing water. And most importantly, hallucinations don't leave physical marks. When I finally mustered the courage to look in the rearview mirror, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. The leather on the back seat was slightly creased, as if someone, or something, had just sat there. It wasn't much, but enough to send chills down my spine. A second later I heard the noise. Clack. The crisp sound of a seatbelt being pulled. Slowly. Tense. As if invisible hands were trying to fasten it into the clasp. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling my heart race. My throat went painfully dry. The breathing behind me intensified, as if someone were breathing with their mouth open very close to my neck. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. I repeated softly as if I were praying. But it happened again. The app vibrated. 4 passengers on board. I felt my eyes burning. I felt tears welling up without even knowing why. It was as if my body was reacting even before I understood what was happening. The name of the 4th passenger appeared. Henry Dalton. And as soon as I read that name, a strange smell began to fill the car. The smell of wet earth, fresh earth, mixed with a bittersweet, subtly rotten odor. That smell? It didn't belong anywhere urban. It was the smell of something that had been taken from the earth and brought into the car. My hand trembled as I reached out to touch the panel, trying to turn off the app. It ignored my touch. The screen went completely black for 2 seconds, and then lit up again on its own. But the map no longer showed any streets. It showed a completely dark background. And then, something scratched the leather of the seat. Yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. It sounded like a fingernail dot or bone. My eyes were drawn to the rearview mirror again, even though my instinct told me not to look. And when I did look, for an instant, a single tiny instant, I saw movement. A blur. A human outline, as if something were sitting right behind me, but out of focus, as if my mind refused to register it. I blinked hard. I blinked like someone trying to wake up. When the focus returned, there was nothing there. But the feeling of presence, she didn't go away. The entire car seemed to sink slightly, as if more weight had just settled into the back seat. It wasn't my imagination. The rear shock absorber actually gave way a little, producing a discreet clunk. And the smell got stronger. I felt my throat tighten. It became almost impossible to breathe. And when I tried to open the window, it only went down 3 inches, and then it locked. That's when I heard it, not a whisper, not a breath, but one voice. Clara, next, impossibly close. We never reached our destination, she said, her voice hoarse and scratchy, echoing in my ear as if it had come from inside my own head. I reflexively slapped the rearview mirror, pushing it upwards. But before I could turn my face away, a shadow flashed past the side window. Too fast. Like a face stuck to the glass, disappearing in the same second. My whole skin crawled. And when I looked at the app again, there was another notification. 5 passengers on board. But this time, there was no name. The entry was listed as unknown, and the feeling that came right after was that the unknown it was much closer to me than the others. When the fifth passenger, the unknown, appeared on the screen, my whole body went cold. It wasn't just fear. It was an irrational, almost animalistic certainty that something terribly wrong was about to happen, something I couldn't prevent. The car became eerily silent. Not even the engine seemed to make a sound. It was as if all sound had been sucked out of the universe. Then, without warning, all the voices started at the same time. Shouting, whispers, conversations rushed through, short, nervous, broken laughs. Meaningless words repeated, stifled, wet. Everything coming from the back seat. Everything mixed together. Everything too human. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't coming from the air. They came from inside the car, from inside the walls, from the ceiling, from the vibration of the steering wheel. The smell of wet earth became so strong that I started to choke. The steering wheel slipped from my hands and the car, even in neutral, shook as if someone had hung onto the back seat. "Leave, please," my voice trailed off mid-sentence. The screens on the dashboard were flickering erratically. The app opened automatically, and in less than a second, notifications started appearing at an impossible speed. Passenger 6 on board, passenger 7 on board, passenger 8 on board, passenger 9 on board. I screamed. Not because I wanted to, but because my body couldn't take it anymore. That I tried to open the door, but the lock was stuck. That I tried to turn off the car, but the key wouldn't turn. Everything was out of my control. And then, silence returned. An absolute, oppressive silence that made my ears hurt. The feeling in the back seat has changed. It was no longer as if anyone was sitting down. It was as if something was going up. I felt a weight shift behind my head, slowly dragged. The leather made a subtle sound, a small crackling sound, as if very long fingers were pressing against the upholstery. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see, but instinct compelled me to look in the rearview mirror. I looked up. Here you go. On the roof of the car, right above me, there was a human face stuck upside down. Well, expressionless, unblinking, as if it were glued to the surface, its skin stretched like a living sticker. The eyes, enormous, dry, they were staring at me. And the mouth, it opened slowly in an impossible movement as if the jaw were dislocated. Something fell out of my mouth. A damp sound echoed from the dashboard. It looked like earth. I felt something touch the back of my neck. Cold, wet, light, like the tips of your fingers. The face on the ceiling began to move, but not like a person would move. It was a tremor. A spasm. As if it were trying to break free, or get closer. Then the mouth opened wider, more than should be possible, and a whisper came from him, but this time unlike the others. A clear sentence, directed at me. "You brought us back." My body froze. My breath caught in my throat, and the sensation of fingers on the back of my neck grew stronger, slowly moving down my spine. I screamed, banged my hand on the roof, on the steering wheel, on anything I could grab onto. That's when the car lurched suddenly. Everything went dark. The voices disappeared, the face disappeared, the screens went black. I only heard one thing. The sound of a door opening, very slowly, behind me. The door behind me opened so slowly that the air seemed to be cut in two. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body simply refused the idea of looking back. I only heard the sound of the wind coming in, carrying that cold smell of dawn mixed with the damp odor of freshly turned earth. My heart was beating so fast I thought I was going to faint. I felt footsteps, soft, shuffling steps like bare feet touching the asphalt. They came from behind, then they stopped, then they came again. And no light came on. No cars passed. No city sounds. It was as if the entire city of Bentonville had vanished. I tried to move, but my arms were numb. I tried to breathe in, but it was as if the air was too dense, too heavy, as if something were sitting on my chest. The back door then closed, alone, with a dry snap. The car started again. The panel lit up again, and the app opened automatically without me touching anything. There was a single line on the screen. Destination set, home. I swear I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't included that I hadn't touched my cell phone. And yet the car started to move. It wasn't me. The steering wheel was turning on its own. The pedals moved without my foot. That it was as if someone, or several people, were driving the car with me. I didn't scream. That I was already beyond fear. What I felt there was resignation. That a strange realization that if it wanted to kill me, it would have done so already. The drive to my building felt like it lasted for hours, but at the same time it felt like it passed in the blink of an eye. Before I knew it, I was pulling into the covered parking garage. The fluorescent lights flickered, once, twice, 3 times, and then they stabilized. The car stopped by itself, the engine shut off, the app closed, and in its place, something appeared that should never have appeared. A photo. My car.my backseat.my shadow reflected in the rearview mirror. And behind me, 4 blurred figures. As if they were people sitting there, but their faces were too dark to see. The last notification appeared above the photo. Thank you for the ride. I jumped out of the car. I literally ran to the door of my apartment without looking back. I closed the door. I locked it. I pushed a piece of furniture. I stayed there for hours, sitting on the floor trying to breathe. When I finally mustered the courage to look out my bedroom window, I saw my car parked down below, motionless. But there was something different about him. The interior light was on, and inside, shadows were moving, varying in size, changing positions. As if someone, or something, were preparing for another race. I didn't go down. I didn't come close. I left the car there until dawn. And today, as I tell this story, I can still feel that cold breath on the back of my neck every time I close my eyes. I don't know why they chose a me car. I don't know if it was me, or was it the path I took that night, or perhaps they were just waiting for the right driver. But ever since then, the same notification keeps popping up on my phone, always at 3:12 a.m. 1 passenger entered the vehicle. And my car isn't even running. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. If you come across this account, please believe every word. I need to get this off my chest before I completely lose my mind. I work as an Uber driver here in the United States, in Tacoma, Washington. I've always done the night shift because it pays better, and because after my divorce I kind of avoid going home early. The silence of the early morning hours has always been less suffocating than the silence of my empty apartment. That night, a freezing Sunday in November, I was already exhausted. My eyes burned from insomnia, my hands trembled slightly from the cheap coffee I always drank to stay awake. I just wanted to finish my shift, but then one last ride came up. 5 stars, registered card, short route. Evan. I thought, okay, just one more. Then I'm going home. When he got into the car, I thought he would just be another ordinary passenger. Young man, dark clothes, hood pulled up, a faint smell of rain. Polite. Quiet. Good evening, he said, his voice too calm. Almost too soft. I answered, started the car, and turned on the GPS. Silence filled everything immediately. No music, no noise, only his breathing behind me. Rhythmic. Slow. As if he were trying to match mine. That's where the first strange thing happened. At the first red light, I instinctively looked in the rearview mirror. It was a habit, you know? Drivers always check who's in the back seat. But, for a second, a single second, his face seemed out of focus. As if the reflex were delayed, blinking slower than it was. As if it weren't exactly the same person. I blinked hard. I shook my head. I blamed tiredness, the yellowish light from the lamppost, my mind playing tricks on me. When I looked again, everything was normal. Evan was looking out the window, his face motionless, his expression neutral. A perfectly ordinary passenger. But I couldn't ignore that feeling that something was wrong. As if the air behind me was colder than it should be. It was as if someone was watching me, even though I wasn't looking in the mirror. I tried to start a conversation just to break that invisible tension. Is everything alright back there? He took a few seconds to answer. Too long? Yes. Just observing the night. The way he said observing made me swallow hard. When the second red light appeared ahead, I felt my chest tighten. Part of me didn't want to look in the rearview mirror again. Part of me knew that something in that reflection wasn't right. And even so, I looked. And I swear, for a moment, It seemed like his face was looking directly at me, even though his body was turned towards the window. I immediately looked away, and I prayed that it had all been my imagination. If I could go back in time, I would have finished my shift before that race. But I kept driving, trying to ignore the suffocating feeling that something was wrong. The car became so quiet that I could even hear the faint hum of the streetlights passing by the window. At the next red light, my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I didn't want to look in the rearview mirror. I really didn't. But that driver's instinct, that obligation to always check, was stronger than the fear. When my eyes looked up at the mirror, the air suddenly left my body. Evan's reflection. He had no eyes that I in their place, there were only deep shadows like holes. It wasn't normal emptiness, it was a kind of darkness that seemed to move, to writhe as if something were alive inside that I was so paralyzed that I forgot to breathe. I turned around immediately to check, and he was normal. Perfectly normal. Looking out the window, calm, his face illuminated by the dim light of the traffic light. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ear. I tried to swallow but my mouth was too dry. The traffic light turned green, and my feet almost gave way as I pressed the accelerator. I tried to take a deep breath, but it's exhaustion. It's just exhaustion. You've been driving for 13 hours. Your brain is playing tricks on you. But then something inside the car changed. The temperature dropped suddenly, the air conditioning was off, but it felt like ice was dripping down the inside of the car, sliding down the back of my neck. The steering wheel was cold to the touch, almost frozen. And then Evan spoke without turning away, without changing posture. Are you seeing something strange? I felt my hands trembling. How did he know? And no, I said, trying to sound firm, but my voice faltered midway that he kept his gaze fixed on the window, as if he were observing something very far away. At the next traffic light, I swore I wouldn't look. I swore. But when the car stopped, something in the reflection caught my eye. As if someone had grabbed me by the neck. And this time the reflection had eyes, but they were very open, almost leaping, shining in an impossible way as if they were made of pale light. Her mouth was too slightly open, too relaxed, as if her jaw were dislocated. Evan, the real one, remained quiet behind me, breathing slowly, but the reflection kept staring at me. Without blinking, without moving its real body. I felt that icy truth settle in my throat. The reflection was alive, and he was aware that I was watching him. I exhaled, trembling, and the traffic light seemed to take longer than usual to change. I kept driving, but my mind was falling apart. That it was like trying to breathe underwater. Everything was heavy, slow, impossible. The road ahead seemed to narrow with each passing meter, as if the world were shrinking around me. The silence inside the car was no longer just uncomfortable, it was sickening, as if it weighed on me, as if it were compressing my chest. Evan's breathing behind me seemed too rhythmic, too calculated. As if it wasn't his. At the next signal, the reflection did something that removed any doubt I had that it was real. Stop the car. Look in the rearview mirror. It's automatic, they say, and so it was. When my eyes met the mirror, I felt my stomach churn. The reflection was smiling. It wasn't a human smile. Her mouth was stretched too far, too thin, as if there were no muscles there, just skin stretched taut over something trying to mimic an expression. But the worst part is that the real passenger wasn't smiling. He continued to gaze out the window, impassive, as if he were admiring some random landscape. The reflection slowly, very slowly, raised its hand until its fingertips touched the inside of the mirror. But Evan didn't move behind me, not even an inch. A faint, almost imperceptible sound began to emerge from the car's roof, scratched, like fingernails touching metal, following a slow, dragging, almost curious rhythm. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn around. I just kept looking in the mirror, and at the reflection, which now seemed to be testing limits, bending its neck to one side as if it were assessing my fear. My heart was racing so fast I could feel my pulse in my neck. The whole car seemed to vibrate with my tension. And then the reflection, he spoke. Not out loud, her mouth moved in the mirror, opening and closing very slowly. I read their lips, clearly. Don't look back. At that moment, the traffic light turned green, but I didn't notice. The reflection turned its head completely toward me at an impossible angle, as if its neck were made of rubber, while the real Evan remained motionless, giving no sign that he realized what was happening. I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my fingers went numb. Between reality and reflection, only one of us seemed alive in that car. And it wasn't the passenger sitting in the back seat. I don't know how I managed to keep driving after that. My hands barely responded. My brain seemed split between two realities. The one I saw in the rearview mirror and the one I felt behind me. Neither made sense, and yet both felt absolutely real. The car drove to a nearly empty intersection. It was a quiet residential street, surrounded by dark houses and leafless trees swaying in the icy November wind. The traffic light turned red again. And I knew I shouldn't look in the mirror, but something was pulling me back. A presence, a pressure, like invisible fingers holding my head. When I finally looked up at the rearview mirror, the air left my body. The reflection, it was closer. Much closer. As if it had advanced to the edge of the glass. His face was deformed, his eyes fixed on me like blades gleaming in the dark. His mouth was still open, but now it seemed as if something inside it was moving, as if a second smile were growing behind the first. And then he did something that destroyed me inside. He tilted his body away from the angle of the mirror. As if he were trying to get out of it. The image stretched, trembling, distorted, but impossible to deny. It wasn't a reflection. It was something stuck there trying to get through. The streetlights above began to flash frantically, illuminating the car's interior in fragments. Each flash revealed a new detail, the outline of the distorted face, the moist glint in the eyes, the subtle movement of fingers pressing against the glass of the mirror from the inside. That's when the radio turned on by itself. A deep squeaking sound filled the sea air. It wasn't ordinary static. It was a damp, guttural sound like breathing amplified by metal. Evan, the real Evan, finally spoke, without looking at me, without moving your head. He's getting impatient. My whole skin crawled. The temperature dropped so low that I could see my own breath condensing in the dark. What do you mean by he? I whispered, almost voiceless. Evan smiled. Slowly. A human smile, but empty, disconnected from the situation. He's been imprisoned there for a long time. I didn't think. I just sped up. The car lurched forward, tires tearing up the asphalt, while I ignored signs, streets, speed limits, everything. I just wanted to get away from that thing. But then I realized something even worse. The face in the rearview mirror was no longer there. Just in the rearview mirror. He appeared in the left side mirror. Then in law, and then, reflected on the dark screen of the switched-off GPS. Everywhere. The voice emerged from the static of the radio. Low, warm, horribly close. Stop the car. I almost lost control when I heard that. And the worst part, the phrase didn't come from reflex.no, but Evan. It came from behind my ear. I almost crashed the car when that voice touched my skin. It wasn't a sound heard. It was a sound sensed too hot, too close, like someone had put their mouth to my ear and whispered slowly just to see me react. I froze. For a moment, my whole body simply gave up. The car skidded, went off the road, and stopped on the shoulder, creaking as if begging to keep going. But I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't breathe. Everything inside the car seemed alive. The air, the shadows, even the silence. Evan was standing quietly behind me. Too quiet. I couldn't look at him. Something inside me told me that if I did that, I wouldn't come back whole. The breathing in my ear continued. Slowly. Slow. Synchronized with mine, as if something were trying to mimic my pattern. I finally dared to raise my eyes. The rearview mirror was completely filled with his presence. There was no face anymore. There was no longer a human outline. It was a dark, almost liquid form, pressing against the glass from the inside, as if the mirror were a malleable surface and that thing was pushing, searching for a crack to pass through. The GPS screen lit up on its own without being connected, displaying only my face, but a little late. As if the reflection was thinking before imitating me. And then I realized, Evan was no longer in the back seat. I turned around in an act of desperation, even though I knew I shouldn't. The bank was empty, but the air was sinking. As if someone were still sitting there. I heard the back door unlock itself. One click slow, almost lazy. The entity, if I may call it that, whispered again. Now coming from all the mirrors at once, each voice with a minimal delay. creating a suffocating echo effect. Start driving again. I locked the doors that I squeezed my eyes shut, and I prayed. When I finally mustered the courage to look in the rearview mirror again, everything was normal. The empty bench, deserted street. No strange reflections. But the feeling didn't go away, not even when I got home, not even the next day. And even now, as I write this, I feel like something is watching my every move. Because ever since that night, my reflection is no longer the same. He always seems a little too late. A little too self-assured. And sometimes, especially when I'm in the car, stopped at a traffic light, I swear I see someone sitting behind me through the window. The problem is that when I turn around to check, there's never anyone there. But the reflection is still there. Breathing slowly, waiting. Something happened to me that morning, and I still haven't found an explanation that doesn't leave me desperate. If you're listening to this, please, just believe me. I don't want to sound crazy. I just want to get this weight off my chest before it completely destroys me. It was a Thursday shortly after 2 in the morning in Cleveland, Ohio. I was on my 6th consecutive shift. Debts, overdue rent, and that feeling that if I didn't work anymore, everything would fall apart. The car seat was already molded to my body. The smell of cold coffee and old fast food permeated the upholstery. My chest ached with exhaustion. My eyes burned. Just as I was about to wrap up, a ride request came in. The pickup address was normal, but the destination shouldn't exist. On the screen, where there should have been streets, blocks, satellite images, there was nothing. Just a black blotch, a square void in the middle of the map, as if someone had erased that area with digital ink. No city name, no zip code, no landmarks. Just a destination marked with a red pin floating in nothingness. For a moment I thought it was a bug. But the GPS opened on its own and plotted a route. A perfect route, to a place that didn't exist. The navigator's voice began to speak, but something was wrong. It was the same text as always: go straight ahead, turn right, but the voice was different. Hoarse, scratchy. As if someone were whispering very close to the microphone, or from inside the trunk of my car. I tried to cancel the ride. The screen froze. I tried turning off my phone. Nothing. Only a white text appeared on a black background. Keep going. He's waiting. My whole body went cold. I felt that kind of chill that starts at the nape of my neck and runs down my spine like an ice drop. The street was too quiet, and for a moment I had the impression that someone was watching from inside the car behind me. I looked in the rearview mirror. Empty. I took a deep breath. I started the car. I needed the money. I convinced myself it was just a glitch, a software error, something like that. But something inside me, a part I'd always ignored, knew I was going in the wrong direction. And even so, I went. The city receded far too quickly. In just a few minutes, I was in an area I didn't even remember existed. The streets narrowed, the asphalt became more worn, and the lampposts, well, they simply disappeared. Darkness enveloped everything, as if the night were swallowing every meter around my car. The GPS kept talking, but the voice wasn't the same anymore. With each instruction it got lower, more scratchy, more human. There was breathing between sentences. Heavy breathing. As if someone were sitting in the back seat, leaning forward, bringing their mouth close to my ear. Gradually, I began to feel a strange pressure inside the car. The air seemed denser, heavier, as if I were in a room that was too closed in. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. Every little sound, the engine, the tires, the wind, seemed amplified, distorted. That's when I heard it. A scratch. Coming from the trunk. First gently, scraping the metal like weak fingernails trying to get attention. Then stronger, longer, as if something were moving inside, pushing against the metal from the inside. I glanced quickly in the rearview mirror, even knowing I wouldn't see anything. And I didn't. But the feeling that someone was with me, behind me, only intensified. I should have stopped the car there. I should have turned around, turned everything off, and gone home. But the phone screen flickered again, illuminating the car's interior with that cold, artificial glow. The map redrew the route on its own. Crooked lines. Curves that made no sense. trails that cut through areas that never existed. It was as if the GPS was inventing roads, creating impossible paths, but at the same time, too precise. The road ahead of me remained straight for a long time. Too long. I couldn't see any more headlights coming from the opposite direction, no comprehensible signs, no sign of civilization. The only thing accompanying me was that continuous, increasingly impatient rattling in the trunk. And then a silhouette. I saw her in the rearview mirror. A human form standing on the side of the road for just a second. Tall, motionless as if watching me. The reflection clearly showed an outline. Shoulders. Head. Arms too long. I turned my head to check. There was nothing. The road was empty. When I looked in the rearview mirror again, the silhouette was closer. As if it had taken several quick steps while I blinked. My heart raced so fast I almost lost control of the car. The GPS spoke again, but this time I swear the voice came from inside the vehicle. Continue. And I continued even though every part of my body was begging me to do the opposite. The road, which until then seemed endless, simply came to an end. No warning. No sign. No turn. The asphalt ended as if it had been ripped from the ground by hand, a sharp cut between civilization and something that shouldn't exist. Ahead of the car there was only dark, damp earth, marked by deep ruts as if vehicles had passed there, but there was no official mapped road. No exit. Nothing. The GPS screen flickered. The route disappeared completely. For a second the app went black. No buttons responded. Neither home nor back. Only after a few seconds did a single white message appear, perfect in the darkness. You've arrived. I swallowed hard. Outside the world seemed dead. The air was too cold for that region. A cold that didn't suit the season, like the air conditioning in a huge, abandoned place. The surrounding trees, tall, thin, much denser than any forest I'd ever seen in Ohio, seemed leaning toward my car as if they were listening. Watching. I took a deep breath. The sound came out shaky, muffled. It felt like the air itself didn't want to be breathed. That's when the phone screen lit up again. This time, no transition, no loading. Just one sentence in larger letters. He is waiting. A shiver ran down my spine so quickly I felt my body tremble. The temperature inside the car dropped as if someone had opened the door of a giant freezer. The windows began to fog up. And, in the absolute silence, I heard something I will never forget. Steps. Slow steps. Dragging. Circling the car. The sound came from the passenger's side. Then from the back. Then from my door. Always at the pace of someone who wasn't in a hurry. Someone who knew exactly where I was, and that I had nowhere to go. I tried turning the headlights on high beam. They flashed only once, illuminating the dense darkness for an instant. And it was in that instant that I saw something among the trees. Not a body. Not a defined figure. Just a faint blur, like a face without contours, floating among the trunks for less than half a second. When the headlights went out, the radio turned on by itself. A faint hissing sound filled the car, like static mixed with very low murmurs. It sounded like someone trying to speak but with their mouth full of water. With each passing second, the sound became clearer, more conscious. My heart felt like it was about to leap out of my throat when something touched the glass next to me. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't a slap. It was a single icy finger, dragging itself along the window so slowly that every inch seemed like a warning. I didn't have the courage to look. I just stood there praying that it was my imagination, the wind, anything. But then came the worst. The car doors locked themselves. It made that dry, cold, definitive click. And the back seat sank, as if someone were sitting there. Oh wait, real. Unmistakable. And behind my ear, very close, where only someone very close could be, I heard a long, deep breath. And a whisper that almost made my whole body shut down. You took too long. I froze. Every muscle in my body seemed to lock up at once. The warm breath behind my ear couldn't be an explanation for my tired mind. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't exhaustion. It was real. As real as the cold that crept up my neck, as if a thread of ice had been pressed against my skin. I couldn't turn my head. It was as if something was holding my neck, not physically, but with a presence too heavy to ignore. My fingers tried to reach for the phone, but the screen lit up on its own, illuminating the car's interior with a pale, almost sickly light. The GPS turned back on without me touching anything. The route was empty. The map was completely black. And then that voice began to speak. But they weren't instructions. They weren't commands. They were phrases about me. Phrases that nobody knew. You're lying when you say everything is okay. You're afraid to sleep in your own apartment. You think about giving up more than you admit. Each word pierced my skin like needles. I felt my face burning, my stomach churning. That thing, that presence in the back seat, knew more about me than I admitted. As if it had been following me for years. As if it were inside my head. The bank sank even further. A firm pressure pressed against the back of my shoulder like a heavy hand. So heavy that I almost screamed. The static from the radio grew louder, filling the car with a mixture of static and indistinguishable whispers, like voices trying to break through a wall of water. And then, the touch. A finger, cold, rough as wet stone, slid from the nape of my neck to my shoulder. Slow. Deliberate. My whole body bent forward involuntarily. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, uncontrollably, as if my mind were begging to escape from something that had no face, no form, but had a will. I tried to unbuckle my seatbelt, but the car locked up completely. The dashboard lights went blank. The steering wheel stiffened. The engine died as if someone had ripped the car's heart out and left it there, dead, with me trapped inside the metallic corpse. The weight in the back seat shifted. Slowly. It was as if it were shifting position to get closer. The air grew so cold that my hands began to tremble involuntarily. I felt its presence leaning forward, until the seat behind me creaked, and something brushed against my hair, moving it slightly. That's when I heard the phrase that almost made me lose consciousness. I brought you all the way here so you could see. Before I could react, a loud crack echoed inside the car like metal being ripped. Something hit the bodywork from the inside, a deep sound as if a huge creature were trying to break through, not through the door but through the very fabric of the car, pushing, forcing, pressing until the metal vibrated. My chest was so tight I could barely breathe. The pressure behind me increased as if it were trying to get out of the seat, cross over, get closer. The last thing I remember before everything crumbled was the glass beside me turning opaque, as if an entire hand had been pressed against it from the inside, leaving long, cold, and human marks. And then everything went black. When I woke up, my face was resting on the steering wheel. The shrill sound of the horn echoed faintly, as if it were coming from very far away. My hands were still trembling, but the air in the car was warm again, too normal, too quiet. For a few seconds I didn't know where I was. My vision was blurry, throbbing with a deep pain in my head, as if I had fainted and fallen forward. I got up slowly. The horn stopped. The car was running. The dashboard was working. The radio was silent. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to suggest what had happened. I looked out the window. I was standing on the side of an ordinary road, a random highway in rural Ohio. It was almost dawn. Bluish light was emerging from behind the hills. A truck passed by, startling me with its strong wind. Life went on outside as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had been ripped away. I picked up my phone. It was off. I tried to turn it on, and it worked immediately with a full battery. I opened the Uber app. My heart raced. The ride wasn't there. No record. No address. No customer. The history only showed my last real ride, dropped off almost 40 minutes earlier than I remembered. It was as if nothing had happened. But it happened. I ran my hand over my face, still sweating profusely, and then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the driver's side window, right at the nape of my neck, there were marks. Long marks. Strings of condensation. As if icy fingers had slid inside the car. I touched the glass. The marks were on the inner layer. Impossible to explain. Impossible to ignore. I tried to take a deep breath, but my chest only tightened more. I started the car immediately and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror once during that drive. I couldn't. The feeling that something might be sitting there again, invisible, waiting, almost made me stop the car in the middle of the road. When I got home, I threw my phone on the table and went to wash my face. I needed to believe it had been a dream, a hallucination caused by extreme exhaustion. But when I returned to the room, my cell phone screen was lit up. The map application is open. And in the center, where that distant black spot once was, now there was another. A second dark area. Much smaller, but slowly expanding. Like an ink stain spreading across the map. And she was closest to my location. The GPS voice then turned on by itself, even without a route initiated. And in that same hoarse, human, intimate tone it said, "He's still waiting." I dropped my phone on the floor. I don't want to know what it means. I don't want to know if it's following me. I only know that since that night, I hear things in my apartment. Footsteps. Breathing. Sometimes I see my own reflection looking behind me as if something is there. Something that doesn't appear when I turn around. And in the car, I no longer ride alone in the CR. At least that's how I feel. I don't know how long it will be until that stain reaches here. But I know that it didn't end on the road. And if you listen to the end, comment. I heard the whispers. Because maybe someone needs to know what's coming.